Starting us off with number 10 is The Hand. This one's from Stephen Wagner, who said his dad told him the story. So back in 1942 in Juarez, Mexico, his dad was around 20 years old and he went to a circus that was visiting town. His younger brother came along and they didn't really go to see the acts, they were more interested in the freak shows. Disappointed after seeing the performers, they were about to leave with two girls when they ran into a short, stubby man. The stranger introduced himself as the greatest illusionist in the world. That's quite a hefty title. When asked if he was part of the circus, the man said the owner turned him down because his act was so frightening. The owner said he was Satan himself. Once he had their attention, he invited them back to his trailer in order to show them the act. Once inside, the stranger put a glove on his right hand, started running his left hand over his right while wiggling his fingers. He then started chanting bizarre words, and when he took the glove off, everyone's jaws just dropped. The stranger's hand was completely skeletal. He turned it, let them see the back, it was completely real. His brother went to take a closer look and the man grabbed his head and said he was really about to show them something now, and at this point everybody shat themselves and made a run for it. The stranger came out onto his porch laughing, and on the floor nearby was a bed of long nails pointing up which he jumped onto. Weird flex, but okay. Blood started coming out of his feet, but he was still just laughing it off, and from that day onwards Stephen's father and brother knew they had met Satan. Coming in at number 9 is Father Urban Grandi. Now Father Urban was a Roman Catholic priest that lived in the Loudun part of France. He was under major scrutiny and received a lot of criticism for ignoring his celibacy vow. If anything, he was known for having sexual relations with many women and as someone who had an elevated sense of lustful depravity. By 1632, he was accused of sending the demon Asmodai to enchant a group of Ursuline nuns into committing evil acts and becoming his sex slaves, you know, as priests do. After numerous nuns made accusations of seduction against him, he was arrested, then acquitted, and then re-arrested. During his second arrest, he was tortured by judges, after which they revealed a contract they found in his bedroom, which indicated he had signed a deal with Satan and many other demons. They saw it as evidence of him making a diabolical pact and convicted him of witchcraft and sentenced him to death. He was burnt at the stake. At number 8 we have A Better Life. This one's from Redditor Kodas_gaming, who said he had a really rough upbringing. His father abandoned his family and his mother was a heroin addict. He used to see her getting beat to a pulp, after which she'd take her frustrations out on him. CPS ended up taking him and his brother away, but a few years later his mum was clean and back with their dad and they regained custody. Sort of happy ending, kind of, but not really. They lived in a small house in Central Texas, and according to the user, the house had a terrifying aura. Anytime he was home, he felt like he was being watched, especially in the bathroom, and he would have regular nightmares. And at this point in his life, his mum was working herself to death because their dad was a lazy slob who did nothing. She got so depressed she tried to take her own life, and desperate to help, the user started praying to God every single day. But nothing changed. He realized for something to change, perhaps he could call on the demonic entity that engulfed his house rather than God. He researched satanic rituals for ages and finally found the one he needed. While his family were out for ice cream one day, he got on his knees, wax coming down the candles he'd lit, and cut his hand and started drawing symbols on the ground in his blood. Obviously while crying the whole time, because who wouldn't cry after doing that? He recited the words and made the deal. And right after he did that, a cold breeze swept through the house and everything went black. But he was pretty much unfazed because he expected something like that to happen, so he went to bed that night and had the worst nightmare ever. He saw himself in the reflection of the mirror in the bathroom with corpse grey skin, bloody tears, and his eyes were crimson as well. There was a noose around his neck and his hair was bloody. During the dream he thought, this can't be me, and then the reflection started laughing, saying, "It is now, you made the deal." He woke up in the bathtub covered in scratches and scars, and it just kept happening and getting worse. 1 month later he started seeing things, hearing things, his nail beds began to recede and bleed, his canines became sharper, and his tongue used to get cut out of nowhere, and he started full on hallucinating and having visions of the past, of native people being slaughtered. And how did that even happen? I don't even know. And what did he get out of all of this? Other than his mum getting a higher paying job, not much at all. So moral of the story, know what you're getting into before you ask the devil for help. Filling our number 7 slot is Joseph Smith. Now Joseph was a Mormon prophet in the early 1800s who claimed he encountered Satan before he saw Christ for the first time. We have both big big shots in one story, how about that? The story goes that despite never doing this before, one day he just decided he was going to pray to God out loud. He went into the woods on a sunny day and knelt down and began to pray. I don't know why he went into the woods, he could have just done it in his house, but okay. But as soon as he did, he said he felt he was seized by a power that engulfed him entirely. He said it was so powerful he tried to speak but felt like his tongue was bound. A thick darkness surrounded him and he thought for sure he was going to die. And I mean, fair enough for being realistic. If I felt that, I'd probably think I was gonna die too. He was ready to sink into this despair that was around him, but in one final hope he used all his strength to call on God to get him out of Satan's hold. Then all of a sudden he saw a huge pillar of light over his head which came down on him. As the light rested on him, he saw two personages in the air above him and everything was fine again. At least this one had a happy ending, sort of. Now at number 6 is Madame Lalaurie. Delphine Lalaurie has been mentioned many times on this channel, but just a quick recap for you. She was a big Creole socialite in New Orleans. To the public, that is. Inside her house, she tortured and killed the majority of her slaves in a way you can't even imagine. In 1834, a house fire took over her mansion, and that's when she got exposed because authorities found bodies upon bodies of bound or mutilated slaves. One's stomach had been cut open and his intestines were wrapped around his neck. A bucket was also found with various organs from various slaves. A bucket. That's how much mass killing the woman was doing, that she needed a bucket for all the organs she was harvesting. Anyway, with some stroke of luck, she managed to escape New Orleans and go to France, but many believe she didn't just escape due to luck. She invented a religion involving voodoo and black magic, and on top of that, people vehemently believe she made a pact with the devil in order to be able to still be wealthy, still be free, and escape whilst committing these horrendous acts. I mean, for me, it was either the devil pact or she paid a lot of important money to let her go. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 5 is the satanic cult. This one's from Brad, who said back in 2005, him and his friends spent one summer TPing a lot of houses. In the town they grew up, there were always rumors of a satanic cult that operated around a 10-minute drive away. So one day they decided to go check it out and TP it. Ballsy move, I have to say. The 5 friends went there the day before moon, which I guess is a part of every scary story you hear nowadays, and they bypassed the fence and ended up in a garden enclosure and heard an eerie high-pitched sound. Ignoring it, they continued to explore, found an old locked church, and found nothing else and decided to leave. Bit anticlimactic, but just stay with me. When they got to their car, their key, which was working perfectly 10 minutes prior, just stopped working. The car alarm started going off and then it magically just unlocked by itself. They piled in and drove off, and mid-drive the lights in the car just went off. The driver didn't press anything to cause it, it just happened. Panicked, they rushed home, and when Brad got to his front porch, he found 3 identical black cats. Keep in mind he lives a good 25 miles away from the cult, so how did these cats even get to his house? He took the cats as a bad omen and decided to take the cats a few miles out of town and leave them there, and the whole drive he was being followed by 2 black cars despite taking small dirt roads. Now I don't know if people were just messing with him here or the satanic cult was there and they saw him and everything was their doing, but either way, it's scary and it's creepy. At number 4 is Giuseppe Tartini. Now from the name, doesn't he just sound like a brilliant Italian musician of some kind? His name just has the ring to it, you know? Anyway, Tartini was an Italian composer and violinist during the Baroque period. He was very influential in Italy, but he was also known for his huge inferiority complex and uncontrollable temper. And I can just see that equaling to a lot of smashed violins. But anyway, the story goes that one day Tartini heard Francesco Verrocchini playing the violin better than him, and he was fuming and also dissatisfied with his own skills. The event made him spiral into depression for months, and in that time he worked in solitude and practiced the violin for 12 hours a day. During this period, it's said he had a dream in which the devil appeared and he met him. He appeared at the foot of his bed and played a sonata on the violin like he invented the damn activity. He offered him success in all his musical dreams in exchange for his soul. Did he accept? Well, it was never really confirmed, but when he woke up the next day, he wrote down as much of the sonata as he could, but no matter how many times he played it, it just wasn't as good as the Devil's version. If you want to check it out, the sonata in question is called the Devil's Trill Sonata, his most well-known piece, and it's quite hard to play even by today's standards. But the fact he could never play it as well as the Devil, I mean, doesn't that just indicate he wasn't successful in everything he wanted to be? So am I the only one identifying this major plot hole we have going on? Did he accept? Did he not? Let me know, Tartini. Filling our number 3 slot is Gemma Galgani. Gemma was an Italian mystic, later saint, in Italy during the late 19th century. She believed that the devil was waging a personal war against her. She said he loved giving her horrible headaches to the point she couldn't even pray. I mean, honestly, I just feel like that was a bad migraine, but moving on. She went on to say that once she was writing at her desk alone and the devil came and dragged her from the table by her hair with such force that her hair came out in clumps. In another attack, the devil took the form of a big black dog and put his paws on her shoulders, making her whole body ache all over. In another one, she was drinking holy water and he twisted her arms so backwards that she fell to the ground in pain. If that's not bad enough, she said he even took on the form of people she trusted or knew, and once he even took the form of an angel. The worst incident though was when he started giving her blows to the head. She ran to her room but found him there with a rope. He kept trying to get her to give in to the wickedness and she kept resisting, and so he kept striking her with the rope as she was on the ground. He then threw her on the bed, then dragged her from it and violently smashed her head against the ground, and she passed out. Just imagine all this happening in your room and no one's there to help you. I'd be terrified. But I'm also curious as to what form the devil took when he attacked her all those times, and if anybody was around, were they seeing this happen? Was she being attacked by an invisible force? Like, what was happening here? Now at number 2 is Steve. This one's from Redditor Shabby Boa, whose real name is Steve and who used to be a trucker for 30 years. One night after a drop-off, he was on his way back home when he stopped at a diner to pee. It was completely empty, no customers, no staff, absolutely no one. He quickly peed, and when he came out, a grey-haired man was sitting at the bar. He told Steve he owned the diner and gave him food and a drink. When he got up to leave, the man said food is not what you truly desired tonight. Weirded out, Steve left and got into his truck. About an hour and a half later, he had to pee again. Steve, you've got a small bladder, mate, and saw another small diner which he stopped at. He went inside and again it was completely empty save a grey-haired man at the bar. It was the same man who said nice to have you back, Steve, as soon as he walked in. Steve got pissed at this point, thinking he was being screwed over by this guy, and demanded to know what the guy wanted. He said he was trying to help Steve. He started asking about Steve and how he used to have a family. Steve told him his wife and daughter died in a house fire years ago caused by faulty wiring. But the man questioned him, saying it wasn't just faulty wiring. The faulty wiring was a happy coincidence that just so happened to have happened the same time Steve left a lit cigarette in the house. Steve fought with him more, and in the end the man offered him a deal. He said he could bring back his wife and daughter in exchange for his soul after he died. Thinking it was complete bullshit, he agreed and left the diner. Before he did, he asked the man who he was, to which he responded, "I am the devil." That night he got home as if he never stopped anywhere at all, and when he entered the house, he heard his wife say, "Steve, is that you?" and the small footsteps of his daughter. He was so excited, but when they came down the stairs, their skin was charred black. Chunks of it were falling off, their clothes had fused and melted with their skin, and Steve could barely hold in his puke. And at that point he'd realized he'd made the biggest mistake ever, and that the next 30 years were literally gonna be hell. And finally, at number 1 is The Man. This one's from VR Greg, who said she met the devil for the first time when she was 8 years old. She was walking through a forest on her way home from school when she encountered a black-haired man in a shabby suit. Except one foot of his was a goat hoof and the other was a rooster claw. She could see them when she looked at him directly, but peripherally they looked completely normal. She took him for a walk and then he left. By the time she was a teenager, she assumed the counter was maybe a dream, or maybe that she just imagined the whole thing. But one day she was watching a news story about a man who got away with killing his wife, and as they showed the judge announcing the not guilty verdict, the murderer turned around and smiled at a man behind him who wasn't his lawyer. She recognized him right right away. Black hair, shabby suit, hadn't aged a day. Her parents threw her a surprise 16th birthday to which nobody came to, which is just really sad. I'm sorry that happened to you. She ran home crying and she knew no one came because her classmate Erin had her party the same day just to spite her. That night she slept thinking about all the horrible ways Erin deserved to be punished, and the next day at the breakfast table her dad looked shaken. He told her that Erin had been found dead in the park. She met the devil the same day in her room and he told her she had wanted it to happen and he executed it for her. He offered her a deal, but thankfully the one piece of common sense that 90% of people possess is knowing that you should never make a deal with the devil, so she didn't. The girl didn't see him again until the funeral of her mother, where he told her the doctors lied to her about her mother dying peacefully, that it was agony and that no one was around to help her. She started immediately screaming and her dad ran over to her and made her sit down. When she asked him where the black-haired man was, he said, "You were standing alone, honey," and just started screaming out of nowhere. Shivers. That gave me shivers.
Number 10. Richard Cabell. This man lived in Devon, England during the 1600s and was apparently a huge dirtbag. He would torment people in his town and even abuse his wife. One night, in a violent rage, he struck his wife and she tried to escape. He then hunted her down and killed her and her dog. We all know what happens next. People believe that he felt he had the freedom to treat everyone horribly because he made a deal with the devil for immortality. But he did eventually die on July 5th, 1677. After he died, there were reports of a ghostly figure walking around the gravesite. This freaked out the locals so much, so they put a giant slab of stone on top of his grave, as well as encased the tomb with metal bars. And it was said that at night you could see a ghostly figure that kind of looked like a beast with glowing red eyes. Some people thought that it was Satan looking for the soul that belonged to him. Number 9. The Carpenter. The devil's weaved into history in so many different places. This ancient tale comes from a village called Tyrol in Austria. The legend has it that the locals had a well-traveled bridge that they used to cross from their village to a village called Schruns. One day, the bridge was destroyed in a massive flood. The villagers were very distressed, so they got help from a local carpenter. They told him that if he could rebuild the bridge in 3 days, they would pay him a huge amount of money. He knew such a task would be impossible, so he asked the villagers if he could have a day to think about it in order to come up with a solution. That night, when he was trying to find a way to build the bridge in such a short period of time, he was visited by a man with a little green hat. I love how these stories just have some creepy dude that shows up to your house in the middle of the night and you're like, I wonder what he wants. It couldn't be anything bad. Well, the little man told the carpenter that he would build the bridge for him and he could keep all the money. The only thing he wanted in return was the soul from the first person to leave this house and cross the bridge. The carpenter knew this was the devil, so he had a plan. The next day, the bridge was built and the carpenter showed up. The devil saw him there and was jumping in excitement to get his prize. Then the carpenter pushed a goat onto the bridge and said, "Here's your soul. You got played, dude." Legend says the devil took the goat and people started roasting him as he was walking around with the goat. People were like, "Hey, you should have read the fine print. Oh, you two look like a great couple." I just love the idea of people roasting the devil. Like, oh, Prince of Darkness can't trick a tradesman. Number 8. George Lukens. Back in the day, if you got sick, you kind of had two options. You either got sicker and died, or you could go to a church and get an exorcism. On May 31st, 1788, George Lukens wasn't feeling too hot. He had started having convulsions and it was reported that he would yell out in a voice that didn't sound human. So he went to the doctor, but after trying almost everything, the doctors couldn't cure him of whatever his ailment was. So he had plan B. He went to see Reverend Easterbrook to get his soul washed. The Reverend tried to help George, but it seemed that what was tormenting him was too strong for just him. So he brought in 6 other priests to perform a super exorcism. The 7 of them took their combined power to cleanse George. During the process, he changed through 7 different demonic personalities, one of which claimed to be the devil. After the super exorcism, George was cured. And probably didn't live past 35 because that's how life went back then. Number 7. The Codex Gigas. Would you read a book that might have been written by the devil? I think that one's a hard pass for me. I'll stick to reading the back of cereal boxes. Well, the Codex Gigas is said to have the devil's actual handwriting, and whoever reads it becomes cursed. Why would you read that? I don't know if I believe that the devil's handwriting is in the book, but I wouldn't want to be wrong just for some light reading. The story goes that back in 1523, Ludovico Spoletano wanted to make the best spaghetti ever, so he summoned the devil. Nah, I'm just kidding. He wanted to answer a series of questions he'd been asked. Exam season is very tough. It's documented that the devil possessed him, grabbed a pen, and started writing. Most of the text has never been decoded except for one sentence that says, "I think it smells like updog." Number 6. Through the Window. This one was written by Redditor Gayreka. It's a story his father told him about when his dad was growing up. He said that when his dad and uncle were younger, his uncle was a bit of a rebellious kid. Never listened, would stay up late, draw dicks on everything. His father told him that it was a big problem, that his uncle was constantly challenging authority and would get in fights with his parents all the time. Well, one night, the whole family heard a blood-curdling scream come from his uncle's room. The family rushed in there and his uncle was freaking out. He said there was a man standing outside his window. Their father went to check for someone but couldn't find anything. His uncle describes the man as wearing a long trench coat and having no face except for glowing red eyes. After this, his uncle was as sweet as pie, became a respectful member of society. So was this a devil encounter? Or was this a story a father told his son so he wouldn't act up? That's healthy parenting. Scare him psychologically, but he'll be a good kid. Number 5. Michael Scott.
No, God!
Not the hilarious character from The Office. Michael Scott was a Scottish mathematician born in 1175 and is considered one of the most brilliant men to come out of Scotland. He traveled through Europe and eventually ended up in Italy. While in Italy, his brilliance didn't go unnoticed. He gained the attention of Emperor Frederick II. Frederick brought Michael into his court as the head astrologer. But when you're a super smart guy back then, people get a little suspicious. It's said he could summon demons to do his bidding, and they would go all over the world to bring him delicacies. And that's just where his power started. There's myths of him defeating a coven of witches that he turned into stone. It's even said he changed the course of the river Steeds. But the most famous one is him summoning the devil to build a road to his castle. His father had just built a shiny new castle and it needed a road. I mean, you don't want to be the only castle in the neighborhood without a road. Like, what do people think? So he called the devil and many demons to build a road for him. He could have just hired contractors. He owed the devil his soul and foresaw that the devil would kill him by dropping a rock on his head. So he always wore a metal cap. But one day, he took off his metal cap when entering a church, and a rock fell on his head and killed him. They get you when you least expect. Number 4. John Dee. John Dee was born in 1527 on July 13th. He was an Elizabethan mathematician and astrologer, but he also liked to dabble in the occult. He was into some pretty freaky stuff. Even though he was researching black magic behind closed doors, he managed to work his way up as a man of intellect, becoming the royal astrologer for Queen Mary. However, his little secrets caught up with him and he was arrested for heresy in 1555. How do you get caught for something back then? The only way you would find out would be if you told people. Like, how was your weekend? Pretty good, you know, sacrificed a goat to the Dark Lord. Anyways, when he got out, he kept digging into the occult. In 1582, he claimed to contact the spirit world. People weren't a fan of this, so he had to move up north to the Manchester Collegiate Church. You can go visit his office to this day. There's the desk that he worked at with a giant burn mark in it. It's said that it's the devil's footprint. I would be pissed. I work all this time to summon the devil. He shows up and he puts his feet on my furniture. Number 3, Robert Johnson. Become one of the greatest musicians who ever lived and people are going to start rumors about you. Robert Johnson is one of the most talented and influential blues musicians who has ever walked the earth. And a big myth about him is that he sold his soul to the devil to become as great as he did. As the story goes, he was walking down a highway and came across a man that offered him the ability to play the blues like no one has ever done before, but it would cost him his soul. Robert was like, yeah, I'll do that. I mean, what is a soul really? It's like a concept or like whatever. Well, Robert went down in history for his amazing skills and died suspiciously at 27. Number 2, Niccolo Paganini. Said to be the greatest violinist who ever lived. Seemed to be a common theme that back in the day, if you were great at something, they probably thought you sold your soul to the devil. No, it can be that you have like a natural gift and you work super hard, you just made a deal. Well, the same speculation goes for Niccolo. He was an Italian violinist like none other. He was so gifted that he would surpass anyone who ever taught him. He was touring at 15 and probably got hit on a lot. Part of why people probably thought that he had sold his soul to the devil was that he looked so ghoulish. He was tall, skinny, had pale skin, long black hair. He was kind of like a hot Edward Scissorhands. People would even say that they could see the devil hold his violin while he played. I think they were just jealous. Number 1. George Whitefield. Now this one is my favorite for sure. George was a traveling evangelist. He wandered around trying to get people hyped on God. I mean, we've all seen these guys.
Do it, Jesus! A brand new hip bam, 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 bam.
In 1740, George was in Ipswich, Massachusetts. He was putting on a banger show. Like, people were going nuts. Apparently, the sermon was so hot and he was bashing the devil so hard that the devil showed up and was like, "You talking?" And George was like, "Yeah, I'm talking." And then he fought the devil. This is like an episode of Maury. George then summoned the holy power to push the devil out, and after that, the devil fell off a cliff and landed on one foot. He's got like a +10 on acrobatics. It's said that the devil's footprint is there to this day. The devil is probably at home like, "Dude, I don't even know you. Why are you talking so much smack?"
Number 10, Will Carroll. Will Carroll, the drummer of the band Death Angel, caught COVID-19 at the end of his band's European tour. It was a long, hard battle, and thankfully, Carroll was able to come back from it, but the battle along the way may have included an encounter with Satan himself. The virus put him in a critical state, which involved Carroll lying unconscious in his hospital bed for 12 days straight. In an interview with San Francisco Chronicle though, Will revealed that those 12 days were spent in a peaceful dream state. In his dreams, or I would call them nightmares, the devil would punish him repeatedly for the sin of sloth. The devil would apparently turn him into a bulbous-like creature and make him puke blood until his heart gave out. These were the dreams he was having over and over again. Since recovering from the disease, needless to say, Carroll has changed his lifestyle habits. For more reason than this one, it appears recovering from this awful virus we all hate definitely felt like returning from hell. Maybe the virus is from there too. Wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. Number 9. Giuseppe Tartini. Everybody wants to be the best at something, but for Tartini, the best just wasn't good enough. Tartini was born on April 8th, 1692, and the guy might as well have been born with a violin in his hand. He was brilliant, a brilliant musician and composer, and he thought so too, until one day he heard someone playing the instrument he dedicated his life to with a kind of expertise that he had never heard. This sent him spiraling, and for 12 days, Tartini locked himself away practicing all hours of the day. While he drove himself mad, the devil decided to pay a visit to a desperate soul in a dream. He offered to make Tartini the most masterful violinist in the world in exchange for his soul. Like the wise guy he was, he asked for a demonstration, so the devil picked up the instrument and played a sonata with ease and beauty like nothing he'd ever heard before. When Giuseppe awoke, he scrambled to write down the sonata, which has become easily one of his most popular pieces of work. Its name? The Devil's Trill, and I listened to it and it is beautiful. For his entire career though, Tartini remained frustrated with the piece, as he was never able to play it exactly as he had heard it. This story is a reminder to never make a deal with the devil, as you never really get what you asked for. Number 8. Rose La Tulipe. It appears that the devil and the violin kind of go hand in hand. The story of Rose La Tulipe is a famous French-Canadian story and one of my absolute favorites. The woman who shared this story with me swears it was true, and I can't help but believe it either. Rose begged her father to host a dance on the eve of Lent, and he agreed, but with one condition, that at midnight the dancing had to stop. Dancing wasn't allowed during Lent, so if they continued, they would be sinning. Rose agreed, and everyone came to join on the night, and Rose danced with anyone who would, even with other men, though she was engaged. Then at 11 p.m. a knock came at the door, and the priest opened it to reveal a dazzlingly handsome stranger, and Rose fell hard. The priest welcomed him and requested that he take off his hat, shoes, and jacket, all of which the man refused, saying he wasn't staying long. He immediately swept Rose in a dance and asked no one else for the remainder of the evening. As soon as midnight hit, the dancing stopped, but the man whispered in her ear, "Just one last dance, my Rose." With struggles she resisted, but suddenly her feet, bewitched it seemed, began dancing without her. The man then kissed her, and the spark from their kiss set the house ablaze. The next morning Rose was found mumbling around the ashes, now mysteriously an old woman, the devil having taken part of her soul with him. I know, that sounds like a legend, but like, thanks for indulging me because I really love that story and I want an opportunity to tell it, so Here it is. Other versions say that she actually got taken back to hell with him, and another is that her mother came and saved her. A whole bunch of stuff, but I think that one's my favorite. Okay, number 7, Richard Cable. Richard Cable might as well have been the devil himself. A squire at Brooke Manor in Devon, England in the 1600s, he was known as a monstrously cruel man. He abused his wife, and one night she escaped him with him hot on her heels. He killed her and her faithful dog, but little did the man know that that dog would haunt him for the rest of his days, and there would be many. At least that's what Cable thought. Cable had made a deal with the devil to live forever, but mysteriously, Cable passed away in 1677. But it appears the devil did give him everlasting life, as a spirit walking the moors at night, forever being chased by a herd of hounds. The locals even put iron bars around his tomb because there were so many sightings of him wandering around the moors. Instead, now, a red glow occasionally emits from his resting place, and the howls of demons are said to gather, waiting to claim his soul for their master. Number 6, Saint Dunstan. Saint Dunstan was a saint who lived in 900s, and for some reason the devil loved to visit him. He was a talented metalsmith, and one day an old man requested that he make a chalice for him. Dunstan agreed, but when he looked back up at the old man, he had shifted into a woman, and then very suddenly a boy. Immediately he knew it was the devil, but fearing his wrath, concealed his distress and crafted the chalice. Subtly though, he put his blacksmith tongs in the fire, and quick as he could, he thrust the tongs onto Satan's nose and cast him from the cell. That wouldn't be the last time he saw the devil though. Dunstan would face him once again and attack the devil by hammering into his hoof, and only agreed to remove it if the devil agreed never to cross a threshold where a horseshoe hung. And that's why today horseshoes are considered good luck, so take a lesson from that. Number 5, A Boy Named Scott. An article written by Richard J. Bonifant recounts several near-death experiences in order to try and see similarities. Some usually describe a light or a tunnel, but after a little boy named Scott got into an accident, he may have met something much darker. On June 10th, 1995, Scott and his family were enjoying getting ice cream from the ice cream truck, as you do, but Scott was so excited he ran out from behind the truck and he got hit by another motorist. He was almost declared dead, but 8 hours later, thankfully, he awoke in intensive care. The weirdest part was that he described in perfect detail what had happened to him as if he was watching from across the street. He knew every single detail. It was really freaky. He even recalled trying to give his dad a hug, but passing right through him. The scariest thing though was who he ended up meeting. He suddenly faced a dark vortex and felt himself being drawn into it by the haunting, putrid image of the devil. Scott said he looked like a man made of rotting flesh, and he tried to grab Scott, but he was whisked away into a tunnel of light, so it was kind of like the devil's trying to steal him from God. I'm glad things ended well for the little boy, getting to be with his family again, but still, not something anyone wants to see in the afterlife. Number 4, Dr. Paul Thigpen.
All of a sudden I felt as if the darkness had filled my whole body, and that there was maybe a little part of it that was still me.
That was a clip of an interview with Dr. Paul Thigpen, who despite being raised under a Christian household became an atheist before he was even 12 years old. That is until one day he was hanging with his friends when he was around 17 by the water in the front seat of a car. All 3 of them were squished in, and a palpable darkness began pressing into the top of his head, all the way to the bottom of his toes. He said it took over the majority of his body, and though he'd become an atheist, he didn't drink or do drugs, so we know this isn't a psychedelic experience, but his body suddenly felt like a kind of superhuman strength taking over him. A voice in his head whispered, "I'm throwing you into the water." To this day, Dr. Paul can't swim, and his body started moving across his friend's seat to leave the car. He knew he was going to die. Then he heard another voice that said, "Focus on the cross." He suddenly remembered the cross his girlfriend gave him, so he grabbed it, and meanwhile his friends were like freaking out. After holding the cross for a while, he said the darkness subsided, and when he told his friend what had happened, he said, "That's strange. The same thing happened to my girlfriend." He sought counsel from another friend who without a doubt said that he had been visited by the devil. Later he discovered that his girlfriend's friend was a witch, and that kind of pointed all the arrows in that direction, so who knows. Was it a demon or in fact the devil? Either way, something changed his mind. Watch the rest of the interview and decide for yourself. Number 3, the man with the glowing eyes. Reddit user Dabby_U_69 had an experience as a kid that I don't think anyone could be the same after. They grew up in a pagan pagan household, which apparently meant you saw a lot of weird stuff. But one day, on a Tuesday in the afternoon, she was playing with the daughter of a family friend who they called Jay, just outside as you do. So they're just playing, and then all of a sudden Jay just stops dead in her tracks and points behind her. She froze and then turned around slowly to see, and I quote, a tall shadow man about 6-7 feet tall in a trench coat and hat. The scariest thing about him was his eyes. Oh god, his eyes. Huge, red, and glowing circles, but its actual eyes were small, bloodshot, and his pupils were tiny. The man reportedly tried to strangle them, but they bolted too quick for the house. Once they told their moms, they in turn freaked out because apparently at the same time the man appeared, the TV had turned long static. They brought in a psychic who said, "My love, the devil is here and he wants to hurt you. He was sent by someone, but we don't know who." The woman then gave a crystal bottle filled with sage and lavender along with something else to ward him off, and apparently the bottle is running out. So I hope she's okay. Number 2. Father Gabriel Amorth. Father Gabriel Amorth was the official exorcist for the Diocese of Rome and claimed to have performed 60,000 exorcisms before he died in 2016. But one day in 1997 he encountered a spirit he never thought he'd see. A slim young peasant man was escorted to a small room where Father Amorth waited him. Immediately he knew something was wrong. He requested the help of Jesus, and as soon as he did, the man began to spit and curse in English, which wasn't a language the man was known to speak. But then the man was seething with anger and drool drip from his mouth as he stared down the father. He tried to attack him, but the exorcist held him back with prayers, demanding the demon reveal its name. He called out, "Unclean spirit, whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man snarled, and what came out next paralyzed him. Dripping evil, the man said, "I am Lucifer." He continued fighting the devil with prayer, and the windows formed ice crystals as he did so. The man also bent backwards for 25 minutes, howling at him, then began hovering at 3 feet in the air. Was it him? We don't know! We just don't know, but it certainly sounds like it. Number 1, last but not least, we kind of have to talk about this because I think a bunch of people saw the devil here. Castle Huska is one of the creepiest places in the world, as it was specifically built to keep the devil inside. Legend says that the castle was built over a gateway to hell. From afar, it looks like a typical old castle until you get closer. The castle wasn't built to be lived in, as evident by the fake windows and doors. Though there's a way inside, people don't recommend you step foot in there. In 878 AD, winged beasts and half-human creatures spilled from the gateway and terrorized the people in the village. Somehow they held them off long enough to build the place, but they were still curious. When construction first began, prisoners in the village would be offered a pardon if they agreed to be lowered by rope into the hole. The first man to attempt it is said to have met the devil himself while he was down there. He was tied up and slowly lowered. After a few moments in the darkness, the man began screaming and begged to be pulled up. By the time they hauled him up, he looked as though he aged 30 years. His hair was white, his skin creased and speckled. They tried to discover what he had seen, but the man was incoherent and was later put into an insane asylum before dying 2 days later.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Illusionist. This is said to be a true story from Juarez in Mexico of when the devil appeared to a man there. It happened in 1942 and was later told by his son before spreading around the world. On a summer's day, the man went down to see the circus in town with his father and his brother. The shows weren't very interesting that year, but they met 2 girls and went off to hear some live music. Suddenly, they were stopped by a short man in a dinner jacket. He claimed that he was the greatest illusionist in the world, but that the circus turned him down because his act was so terrifying. The owner had accused him of being the devil. This got the man and his brother's attention. The stranger said they could see the amazing trick at his home. They followed the stranger back and sat on a sofa in his trailer. The stranger extended his arm and began running his left hand over his gloved right hand, all while chanting a strange tongue. He asked if they were ready. They said yes. He pulled off the glove and everyone screamed. To their horror, the hand was now a skeleton hand, still wiggling its fingers. The man's brother got up to take a closer look. The stranger grabbed the top of his head with his bony hand and said he was now really going to show them something. At this point, they all ran and screamed. The man stopped and looked back. The stranger was standing on top of the steps and laughing at them. On the ground was a wooden plank with long nails pointing up. The stranger jumped off the step and landed right onto a nail. Blood poured out of his boot, but he continued to laugh. The man just stared at him, transfixed, until his brother grabbed him and they both ran away. They knew it was the devil, they felt it was the devil, and they say it was a day they can never forget. Next up at number 9 now we have Robert Johnson. He's one of the most legendary blues musicians of all time, whose music went on to influence other musicians for generations. Aside from his music, folks may tell you another story about Robert Johnson, that he met the devil. They say that one day Robert was walking down the highway on a cool October night when he came to a crossroads. A tall man was sitting there on a log by the side of the road. He said that he knew Robert and asked him if he wanted to play the guitar like nobody had ever played it before, to be the king of the Delta blues. He said yes, he wanted that. The devil warned him though that although his music will enchant the crowds, his soul will now belong to him. This is not just any crossroads, the devil said. I put this X here for a reason, and I've been waiting on you. Then the devil possessed him. Robert's eyes rolled upwards in their sockets. The moon pierced his eyes. Then he looked at the man straight in the eyes and said, "Step back, devil man. I'm going to Rosedale. I am the blues." Now, whether or not you believe that story, Robert Johnson was an incredible blues musician. I was actually listening to him as I wrote this script, and he also died under mysterious circumstances involving some sort of poison when he was 27 years old, which historians are still trying to fully understand. Moving on to number 8 now, we have St. Dunstan. He was a 10th century hermit who lived in Glastonbury in England. One day a mysterious stranger approached him and asked that St. Dunstan use his skill in smithing to make a chalice for him, a sort of holy cup, if you like. Dunstan agreed and set to work. As he worked away though, he saw the stranger change form from man to woman, from woman into a child, flowing from one to the next. Dunstan realized that this was the devil, but he tried to act as if he hadn't noticed. Then, when the chance presented itself, he grabbed a pair of red-hot tongs from the fire and pierced them into the stranger's nostrils, causing the devil to cry out in pain and flee. A while later, the devil returned, this time as a vagrant street performer playing the harp. Dunstan grabbed him by the leg this time and began shoeing him. Then he nailed a horseshoe to his cloven foot. The devil screamed in agony and agreed to be released on the condition that he never approach a house with a horseshoe hanging over the doorway ever again. This gave birth to the legend that horseshoes are lucky and even keep the devil at bay. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the devil's violinist. That's the name given to Niccolo Paganini. Some even say he was the greatest violin player who ever lived. He was a child prodigy in Genoa, Italy, who struggled to find a teacher that he couldn't surpass immediately. By the age of 15, he was touring solo. Within a year, he had a breakdown and succumbed to alcoholism. He didn't reappear in the public eye until the age of 22, but this time he was somehow better than ever. They say he was able to play 3 octaves across 4 strings in a handspan. Now, you don't actually have to know what that means, but it's thought to be nearly impossible, even by today's standards. He was a striking sight in his performances. Very tall and very thin, with hollow cheeks, very long fingers, pale skin, and flaming eyes with thin lips that held a sardonic smile. To top it all off, he wore all black for his performances. Soon, rumours began to circulate that his violin was the devil's instrument, that Paganini had actually made a deal with the devil. Some say they saw the devil help Paganini play. Others say that they once saw lightning bolts hit the end of his bow during a performance. When he died, he turned down his last rites from a priest. The official account is that he did this because he thought he wasn't going to die, but others say it was because he feared the blessing of a priest. Coming in at number 6 now, we have The Richest. This is the story of Jonathan Moulton. He was an American general who helped the US win the Revolutionary War. He's also known for trying to trick the devil, apparently. Despite being very rich, Moulton wanted more. One night, sitting in front of his fireplace, Moulton said out loud that he'd sell his own soul to the devil to be the richest man in the province. Not want to miss out on the offer of a soul, the devil appeared right there and said that he would make the deal and fill Moulton's boots with gold coins every single month. For a while, Moulton enjoyed finding the gold in his boots every month, but soon he wanted more, and he hatched a cunning plan. He cut the bottom of his boots off and put them on top of the chimney. The devil filled up the boots, but eventually noticed the shoes never filled. The coins were just tumbling down the chimney where Moulton was practically swimming in them. As revenge, the devil took back all the gold he'd ever given Moulton. He burned down the house and kept his soul in hell for eternity. Legend says that years after his death, Moulton's grave was opened, and instead of a skeleton, they found a coffin filled with gold. Next up at number 5 now, we have Saint Pio. We talked about Saint Duncan earlier, but he wasn't the only saint on this list who claims to have had a run-in with a devil. Pio was also known for his frequent and often violent battles with the devil. On one occasion, a local friar found him lying bloodied and bruised in his room. When Pio came around, he said that he had been attacked by either Satan or one of his demons, which had left him with 3 broken ribs. On one night in 1906, Pio heard footsteps coming from the next room, which he thought was his friend, Friar Anastasio. He went to the window and tried to call out to invite him in for a chat. He found that his voice had gone though, out of nowhere. He just couldn't speak. Then he noticed a large black hound sitting menacingly on a nearby window ledge. In his account of what happened next, Pio said, "I saw the big dog enter through the window and there was smoke coming from its mouth. I fell on the bed and I heard a voice from the dog that said, 'Him it is him.' While I was still on the bed, the animal jumped up to the ledge of the window, then to the roof and disappeared." His colleagues believed that the devil was targeting him because of all the exorcisms that Pio had performed over the years. They said that on many occasions, before leaving the body of a possessed man, they would actually hear the devil shout, "Padre Pio, you give us more trouble than Saint Michael. Do not steal the bodies from us and we will not bother you." Next up at number 4 now, we have Johann Georg Faust. A 1507 book titled Historia and Tale of Dr. Johannes Faustus tells the story of Johannes Faustus, who allegedly met the devil. According to the book, he was a German scholar who, quote, "loved what ought not to be loved." It says that he craved nothing more than forbidden knowledge. One day, Johannes traveled to a crossroads in a forest and summoned the devil. He stood inside a protective circle and performed an ancient and unholy ritual. Soon, lightning came crashing down and the entire forest was destroyed. Demons emerged in 3 forms. First, a dragon, then as a man made of fire, and then as an old monk. After hours of conversation, Faust agreed to trade his soul so that his every question would be answered for 24 years. He told himself that things would be fine because, in his words, the devil might not be so black as they used to paint him, nor hell so hot as the people say. Well, the story ends by saying that he was wrong and people were right. It claims that when Johannes died, his soul went straight to hell, where he spent an eternity of torture, wishing for death, but finding that even death had forsaken him. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Signed Pact. Father Urbain Grandier was a French Catholic priest who, in 1632, was accused by a local group of nuns that he had bewitched them and sent demons to commit evil and impudent acts with them. Investigations into Urbain reached a new level with the discovery of what people claimed was a physical contract written on paper between Urbain and the devil. The contract was said to be even signed by Urbain, the devil, and a number of different demons. It read, "We, the influential Lucifer, the young Satan, Beelzebub, Leviathan, Elimi, and Astaroth, together with the others, have today accepted the covenant pact of Urbain Grandier, who is ours. And him do we promise the love of women, the flower of virgins, the respect of monarchs, honors, lusts, and powers." That's where it ended. Well, whatever you guys think about all of that, the local court found him guilty and sent him to burn at the stake. Moving on now to number 2, we have Saint Gemma Galgan. In her diaries, she wrote that she believed the devil himself was waging a personal war against her. In one famous passage, she wrote, "The demon came before me as a giant of great height and kept saying to me, 'For thee there is no more hope of salvation. Thou art in my hands.' I replied that God is merciful and therefore I fear nothing. Then, giving me a hard blow on the head in a rage, he said, 'Cursed be you,' and then he disappeared. I then went into my room to rest, and there I found him. He began again to strike me with a knotted rope and wanted me to listen to him while he suggested wickedness. I said no, and he struck me even harder, knocking my head violently against the ground. At a certain point, it came to my mind to invoke Jesus, Father, Eternal Father, through the most precious blood of Jesus, free me. I then don't quite know what happened next. That contemptible beast dragged me from my bed and threw me, hitting my head against the floor with such force that it pains me still. I became senseless and remained lying there until I came to myself a long time afterwards. Jesus be thanked." That was just one entry, and it was very intense. From the look of her diary, it wasn't her first encounter, and it certainly wasn't her last. And finally, number 1 now, we have Pope Sylvester II. If you had to pick one person who isn't in league with the devil, you may pick the Pope. But back in the 10th century, people thought the first French Pope was a master of the dark arts and had sold his soul to the devil. He was undoubtedly a genius. He was known for his work in mechanics, mathematics, astronomy, clocks, organs, introducing Arabic numerals to Western Europe, as well as natural science, music, philosophy, and theology. That was a lot for one person, especially back then. After he died, rumours began to circulate that Sylvester had made a deal with the devil, that the devil had given to him his intelligence and wisdom in return for his soul. This was a terrifying prospect for Catholics at the time, the thought that their own leader, God's representative on earth, had been meeting and dealing with the devil in secret. In recent years, experts agree that he likely got his skills and knowledge from regular meetings with scholars from all over the known world, and not from some dark dealings. What do you think?
Starting us off with number 10 is Padre Pio. Saint Pio of Pietrelcina was an Italian saint who had countless violent battles with the devil, many of which left him physically wounded and bleeding. One night in 1906, he had footsteps coming towards his room, so he thought it was one of his friends, so he called out to them, but soon realized no sound was coming out of his mouth. No matter what he did, he just couldn't speak. He then saw a huge menacing black hound with smoke coming out of his mouth on a window ledge nearby. The dog then came into his room and said, "Him it is him." Is this a Yoda? Is it a hound? Who knows? And then the dog disappeared. Other encounters involved him being dragged from his bed, being thrown around his room, being spat on. One time he was even left with 3 broken ribs. And Satan would come back to him in different forms, as a black cat, as young provocative girls trying to test his chastity, as his own superiors, or worst of all, in sacred forms. Now, what made him such a huge target for Satan was his work as an exorcist. It was said the second possessed people saw him, they would go ballistic, cursing him, doing God knows what, and just before leaving their body, Satan would say, "Father Pio, do not steal the bodies from us, and we will not bother you." Another attack in 1964 left him with a critically injured spine and various cuts. Moral of the story, Padre Pio was a badass for surviving all of that. Coming in at number 9 is The Corner. This one's from Amy Strada, who said this happened to her when she was 14 years old. She was in her bed asleep, and mind you, her bedroom is just a simple square, and there's a door-sized space between the wall and the foot of her bed. That night she woke up at exactly 2 AM and the only light in the room was coming from her alarm clock. She was just casually looking up the ceiling, but something was looking back at her. It moved to the corner of her room and it had 4 legs that were bent backwards towards the corner of the room, whilst its torso was still facing her. Its legs gripped the ceiling and the 2 walls of the corner, and my mind is breaking even trying to imagine what angle this thing was in. And Amy couldn't see its face, just the shape of its head and its hollow eyes that were just staring at her. She knew she couldn't run because it was clearly blocking the door, so she got under the covers and didn't come out till the morning. I mean, I still use that tactic now when I think someone's in the house, and clearly it worked for her. The first time she mentioned the incident to anybody was 2 years after it happened, and her mum said that her stepdad had seen the exact same figure in his tour of Iraq. He had gone into a forest despite warnings from locals not to. Inside, he had to perform a collective exorcism on his fellow comrade who became possessed. The stepdad believed Satan came out of the soldier and started following him around. So when he came home, it was only about time before his stepdaughter Amy encountered him too. At number 8 we have The Drummer. This one's from Reddit user Smoking Finger Guns, whose grandpa told him the story. Whilst on a road trip with his granddad, he started recalling a story from his youth. His granddad was divorced, but when he was younger he tried to start a band with his brother-in-law Keith. Keith was a great guitarist and the grandpa was a decent bassist. So they bought a small bit of land in rural California that had a house and a barn and turned the barn into a recording studio. They started hanging listings advertising the position of an experienced drummer, and after many trials they settled on a man named Dave. One night they were all drinking and celebrating in the barn. Keith at this point had passed out, jog on Keith, and Dave and the grandpa started talking about weird stuff, mostly occult. Dave's expression then changed drastically and he told the grandpa he was a Satanist and one of really high standing. Did that not come up during the drumming trial with Dave? I feel like that should have come up. But anyway, the grandpa didn't believe Dave and asked him to prove it. Big mistake. But anyway, Dave gets up in all seriousness, holds out his arms and starts chanting in Latin like it's his first language. A few minutes later, Keith, who is passed out, stands fully erect and his eyes are white. No pupil, no iris, just white. Very freaked out, the grandpa instinctively said Jesus Christ, after which point Dave projectile vomits and then dry heaves and then looks at the grandpa with eyes that could kill. He let out a sort of dog growl of some kind and said never speak that name again in my presence, after which both Dave and Keith collapsed. While both were passed out, the grandpa went to the corner of the room just watching them, and he felt a hot sensation on his shoulder like someone or some entity was grabbing him. At that point he really wasn't sure if it was Satan himself or on the opposite side his guardian angel. Filling our number 7 slot is the horseshoe. So this one involves St. Dunstan, who was an English clergyman in the 10th century and who also claimed that he had had many encounters with Satan. St. Dunstan was a very respected man. He was pious, he was intelligent, a musician, a skilled metalsmith and an artist too. The whole package pretty much. Whilst living in Glastonbury one day, a man approached him asking him to make a metal chalice for him, and Dunstan agreed and got to work, but as soon as he did, he realized the man or the thing in front of him was shape-shifting before his eyes. He went from a man to a woman and then to a child, and the transformations were so seamless it was incredibly hard to believe. Okay, the man is shape-shifting, they could be the roughest transformations ever and it'd still be hard to believe. But anyway, Dunstan realized very quickly that this was the devil and pretended not to notice the whole shape-shifting thing. When he got the chance, he grabbed a pair of red hot tongs and pierced the man in the nostrils, which caused the man immense pain and cast the devil out. His second encounter happened while he was playing the harp. A smiley vagrant approached him this time, but St. Dunstan somehow knew it was Satan again, and he grabbed him by the leg and tried shooing him like you shoe a horse. Satan screamed at a pitch so high St. Dunstan thought he was gonna pass out, but he persevered. He let Satan go on the condition that he never enter or approach a house that had a horseshoe hanging outside its doorway, and thus the whole legend of horseshoes being lucky was born. Now at number 6 is The Ritual. This one's from Redditor Graveyard Song 11, and when she was around 15 she met her friend's half-brother Luke and they became partners in crime. He was a typical goth, white makeup, red and black eyeshadow, and those two colours were pretty much the only ones he wore in terms of clothes as well. One Friday night they were bored as hell and Luke suggested summoning Satan, because what else are we to do when we're bored? Board games? Screw that! Satan it is. Either way, Luke lived opposite a cemetery, so they stopped at his house for supplies, mainly candles, milk, a bowl, salt and string. They got to the cemetery and found a clearing and gathered some twigs. Luke grabbed a stick and started drawing a weird symbol. She described it as an upside down triangle with a V under it and an X through it. He then made a circle of salt around it and put the candles around it as well. They stood inside the circle and he began talking, starting with "Oh Lucifer." He kept muttering unintelligibly and dropped all of their ingredients into the bowl of milk. He then took her hand and cut it so it would bleed a bit, and then he cut into his own arm even deeper but directed both blood sources into the bowl. He kept chanting, and at this point the user was freaking out, saying, "You know, I believe you, you can summon Satan, just stop now." Luke ignored her and started speaking in a language that wasn't Latin, it was just unrecognizable. He gulped the bowl and then started vomiting violently. He got onto his hands and knees, heaving, and then asked what just happened. She said she thinks they did the ritual wrong, but Luke insisted they didn't. Things got pretty weird after that and they kind of stopped being friends, which I'm really not surprised about. But every time she ran into Luke, he just looked like death, and her own cut wasn't healing at all, and at points it would bleed like it was just freshly done. A month later she ran into him again and he smelled like rotting and alcohol. He apologized for what he had done to her and gave her a necklace for protection. She asked him whether he needed protection too, and he said he had done the ritual too many times that the necklace didn't work for him anymore. Nowadays she stopped wearing the necklace and her scar started bothering her again, and mind you, it's been years. It became tender and red and throbbed like it was freshly inflicted. And on top of that, the necklace encounter was the last time she ever saw Luke. He disappeared off the planet, no Facebook, no Google searches, his own mother didn't even know where he went. Safe to say Luke's continuous summonings and encounters with Satan didn't leave him in anyone's good books. Coming in at number 5 is the Ball of Fire. So back in 1683 in Poundsgate, England, a strange figure came into the Tavistock Inn and he was dressed in all black and wearing a cloak, but the weird thing was he had cloven hooves instead of feet, which is actually a recurring theme. If you watch part 2, you'll see that in some of those stories as well he appeared with hooves as feet as well. So hooves. Satan. It's a thing. But anyway, he asked the staff for directions to Widecombe in the Moor in Dartmouth. The staff were terrified of this man who wasn't really a man but looked evil as hell, pun intended, and gave him the directions. A few days after this visit, a huge ball of fire smashed into the church of St. Pancras, which was barely a stone's throw away from the inn. It bounced about wildly whilst killing a bunch of people and a dog. Deniers blamed it on an errant ball of lightning, which by the way I don't even think is possible, correct me if I'm wrong, but the innkeepers and those around them vehemently held the belief that it was the power of Satan. At number 4 is Satan's Fun House. This one's from Reddit user Demonic Wolf, and the story happened to him when he was 15 last June. Since his father was a computer programmer, he became very good at it as well, and hacking into the deep web was quite easy for him. One day he got onto a website called Satan's Fun House, and like anyone on the deep web, he just assumed it was just some kind of mess up porn, but before he could click off it, he got a message from a chat room he was on in another tab. The person told him to go to the site and that he wouldn't want to miss today's show. He asked the other person what show, and the person replied, also taking his username, which was weird because he had hidden his IP address so the other person shouldn't have been able to see his username, which was demonic. The other person continued saying go to Satan's Fun House and find out. The boy was scared at this point because the guy knew his name and the fact he was on the Satan Fun House site. He felt like he was being watched, and I don't blame him. He went into the link, but it just said error 404. He went back to the chat saying the link didn't work, but the person told him he was in the right place, don't worry. Suddenly, a loud, deep, raspy voice flooded his headphones and he was directed to another site where he saw a video. He didn't describe the video, but said the extent of mutilation he saw wasn't even the main part. He saw things that couldn't even be explained, no lighting trick, no camera trick, nothing. He was certain it was Satan at work himself. He shut the screen, packed his bags, and left, but the last thing he saw was a note that showed up on his screen with his address saying, "You're next." He tried to get his parents to leave with him, but obviously they just didn't believe him. He ran away from home knowing his parents were about to die and hasn't gone back since. Filling our number 3 slot are the calls. This one's from Redditor Leach Voiles, whose fiance David died in a car accident 6 months prior to making the post. He had gone to a store 45 minutes away to get her ice cream. An hour passed and he hadn't come back. Around 10 p.m. she got a call from his mother saying he had gotten into an accident and died on impact. She carried the guilt with her after he died, always thinking, you know, if I hadn't asked for the ice cream, David would have still been alive. While he used to be at work, they used to talk over Facebook Messenger, and so she used to reread their conversations a lot just out of nostalgia and missing him. But his Facebook started saying he was active even though he couldn't have been. She saw it again and again and again. She messaged the account assuming it was a hacker telling them to stop messing with a dead person's account. She started getting sporadic messages back and forth saying, "Hello, can you see this? It's me, it's David. Please believe me," to which she was getting very angry and very hurt because why would someone want to mess with her like that? And just mind you, the messages were broken, they weren't full words, but it was still clear to see what he was saying, so I'm just relaying the full message to you guys. But then, worst of all, he said, "Please Peaches," which is what he used to call her. She was taken aback, but then realized the hacker could have easily gone through their conversations and known that he called her that. Then the account started calling her. She answered and actually heard David say, "Ashley, it's me." She began crying and asked how he was calling, and the line cut. Later that night, after she got another call, he was saying he missed her, and this time there was no static whatsoever. She was telling him how she missed him, and then all of a sudden he said, "Ashley, why did you kill me? Ashley, you killed me, you murdering bitch." But his voice was deeper, it was distorted. He continued saying, "Ashley, you killed me, you should kill yourself." Then she started getting angry and she pulled herself together knowing David would never talk to her like that. She asked who the hell was speaking, and the voice began to laugh maniacally. The deep voice went on saying he wasn't David, but he had gotten to know him pretty well over the last few months. He went on saying, "Who I am doesn't matter, I will tell you what I want. I want your soul." And then the call ended. Before she could even process what just happened, she got a Facebook notification saying David is nearby. When I was reading the story for the first time, it literally gave me chills, and relaying it to you guys right now also gives me chills. Now at number 2 is Hawk. This one's from Shannara Johnson, who used to be a tarot reader in Sedona, Arizona. She worked at a new age center, and there were about 15 to 20 other psychic readers at the center. She was the new girl, and her room was across Cindy, a longtime reader. Cindy was middle-aged, not particularly friendly, and quite witchy. Downstairs was a binder with a picture and bio of all the readers that customers could go through and choose. There was one Native American reader, also fairly new, called Hawk, Hawk, who everyone loved because he was so nice, and he was also married to another reader at the center called Amy. Hawk started warning Shannara about Cindy, saying she had no good intentions towards her and that she was jealous of her getting so many customers despite being so new. He went on to say Cindy was an actual witch and was connected to a satanic set of Tibetan monks. One day he told Shannara he had seen Cindy stare at her headshot in the binder and perform a spell over it, weird hand gestures and all. He told Shannara she had to protect herself from Cindy and sage her room more often. At one point he even offered to deal with her and said he could do something about her. Once, when the center was quite slow, she went to Hawk for a Native American spirit animal reading. During the reading, his face suddenly shifted and his features were superimposed by another glowing face. The face had a different voice inside, talking about a commitment and a deal, and that if she does it, she could have whatever she wanted. And that line, she recognized it straight away. She knew that was the devil's line. She asked him what commitment he was talking about and his face disappeared. Shannara made an excuse and left Hawk straight away and got more and more scared of being harmed. She sought divine guidance about Cindy and realized perhaps it was Hawk that was the bad guy all along, enticing her to let him harm her on her behalf. She ended up speaking to Cindy and sorting things out with her, but was damn sure Hawk was Satan himself. His wife Amy even woke up one night and his side of the bed was empty, and all she found was a black hellhound with glowing red eyes at the foot of their bed. And finally, at number 1 is The Asylum. I honestly feel like this one could be the basis of a horror film, and if it gets made into one, I'm gonna be really pissed because I thought of it first. But anyway, this story is from Redditor Mystic Dragon 19, who is an urban explorer. Well, she was, until she decided to explore the Celestial Valley Mental Asylum. Why people, why? Abandoned buildings are bad enough, why would you put yourself through going to a mental asylum? Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. But anyway, March 29th, 2019, she packed her bag and necessities, flashlight, phone, some food, etc. I mean, let's be real, this ain't no amateur hour. She got to the asylum at around 7:30 p.m. and what used to be a pristine 4-story white building was now a crumbling, rusty one covered in ivy. When she finally got into the building, she first noticed the smell. It didn't smell musky like most old buildings did, it smelled sickly sweet, kind of like death. She then saw a bunch of graffiti everywhere, some band logos, and a large cruel symbol that to her evoked anger and malice. She saw a gunny against the wall, papers on the ground, real horror movie vibes, but she carried on anyway. She was about to go into the next room when she heard a loud slam. She whipped around and saw the gurney was on its side. It had fallen down despite it not being windy at all, and to make herself feel better, she put some music on to distract herself. By 9:45 p.m. she made her way to the second floor, which looked weirdly clean for a decrepit building that showed no signs of life. She took another step forward and all of a sudden the hall was filled with people, many restrained to gurneys, while doctors took them from room to room. Many of the patients were screaming like animals, and as quickly as they came, they disappeared. The user called out when she saw them, but they couldn't hear her. She ran downstairs having had enough of the second floor, and now past midnight she started hearing Leslie in a sing-song distorted voice. Leslie was her name, just to clarify, and she looked everywhere but no one was there. She went towards a room she saw light coming out of, but stepped into a puddle of sorts. She put her hand in to feel it, hoping it was water, but of course it was blood. Inside the room she saw 6 hooded figures in a circle speaking a language she couldn't understand. She saw a pentagram and a naked tie-down girl laying in the middle of it, who also had a pentagram carved into her. She was screaming to let me go, but of course they wouldn't. On the right of Leslie she saw a huge goat head pointing upwards. The girl got cut again and blood started coming out of the goat's mouth. At this point Leslie had had enough. Took you long enough, and she ran. She saw a black shapeless figure chasing her. She heard footsteps or hooves from it, and then it let out an unnatural bellow. She managed to get to her apartment at 3:30 a.m. in total belief she had just encountered the devil and his minions.
Coming in at number 10 is Mr. Alguin. Ethan Alguin posted online a story that he was told. The story goes, "My grandpa believes he saw the devil. When my dad was a kid, my grandpa used to work at a graveyard. He would get up as it was dark, and within a few hours of working, the sun would come up. One morning, he did what he always had done and got ready for work. As he was walking there, he saw a man in a suit just walking slowly down the street. My grandpa told him something along the lines of, 'May the Lord give you a good morning,' and the guy ignored him and kept walking. My grandpa just ignored it and went to the graveyard as he always had and proceeded to work. After a few hours of work, the sun hadn't started rising yet, and he realized how early he actually woke up, so he went back home. He told my grandma about the guy, and she believes it was something called El Catrin. Apparently, sometimes the devil appears as a very well-dressed person that they refer to as El Catrin. Creepy. Number 9. Johann Georg Forst. This 16th century German astrologer and alchemist was an intelligent and successful man, but this wasn't enough for him. He wanted supreme power and knowledge, so he called upon the devil to provide him with it in return for his soul. For 16 years, he enjoyed his newfound power before he attempted to back out of the agreement. However, the devil convinced him to renew the pact, knowing that upon his death, Johann's soul would reside for eternity in hell. After 24 long years, the devil announced to Johann that his death was approaching. A huge explosion was heard from Johann's room that night, which was believed to be the act of Satan reclaiming his soul. The only thing remaining from the eruption was bits and pieces of Johann's body. Number 8. Sarah Good. Sarah Good was one of the first 3 women to be accused of witchcraft in the Salem witch trials, which occurred in 1692 in Massachusetts. On March 25th, 1692, Sarah was tried for witchcraft. When she was brought in, the accusers immediately began to rock back and forth and moan, seemingly in response to Sarah's presence. Later in the trial, one of the accusers fell into a fit. Sarah denied the allegations against her, but another woman on trial admitted to being the devil's servant. She stated that a tall man dressed in all black came to them, demanding they sign their names in a great book. Although initially refusing, she eventually wrote her name after Sarah and another woman forced her to. When Sarah was allowed the chance to defend herself in front of the 12 jurors in the Salem Village Meeting House, she argued her innocence, proclaiming the other 2 as real witches. In the end, however, Sarah was convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to death. So, did she really see the devil, or was she innocent? Who knows? Number 7. North Berwick Witches. The North Berwick witch trials were in 1590, where a number of people from East Lothian, Scotland were accused of witchcraft. The trials ran for 2 years and implicated over 70 people. The witches allegedly held their covens on the Aled Kirk Green, part of the modern-day North Berwick Harbour area. One source for the events is a 1591 pamphlet news from Scotland. King James VI wrote a dissertation on witchcraft and necromancy titled Demonology in 1597. More than 100 suspected witches were arrested, and several confessed under torture to having met with the devil in the church at night and devoted themselves to doing evil, including poisoning the king and other members of his household and attempting to sink the king's ship. Number 6. Andy Berthrin. One day, Andy decided to make a deal with the devil, like someone does. He said, "My family loved God more than me, and I had a teenage reaction and decided to go my own way. I thought I'd make an actual pact with the devil, and the pact went along the lines of, you give me this, and I'll give you my life." He took me at my word, and it was a very conscious decision that I will always regret. Eventually, Andy restored his faith in Christianity, but while Andy acknowledges Jesus' power is not even comparable to Satan's, he says, the devil was not going to let him go easily. He was attacked spiritually, but not just verbally, but physically as well. He said, "There were images and voices. I spent night after night praying against apparitions and stuff all around me all the time. It's a reality. Some people still won't believe it happens, but it does. I clearly remember an elder suggesting I go and pray and read my Bible. I picked up my Bible and it was like someone stabbed me in the eye, and it burned so much until I put the Bible down, then it would stop." Number 5. Father Gabriel Amorth. In 1997, Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome, and he asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man he was dealing with began to curse and spit and started using English instead of his native Italian. Screaming and howling, the demon burst forth and looked straight at him, drooling saliva from the young man's mouth. Father Gabriel said he returned fire with prayers and other ritual recitations, demanding that the demon reveal its name. He said, "Unclean spirit, whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day, and the hour of your damnation." The man fixed him with a glare, snarled, and said, "I am Lucifer." Father Gabriel was shocked. He did not expect to receive such a terrifying response. He mostly used prayer as his weapon, reciting verses of libertation from the Roman rite of exorcism. As Father Gabriel continually commanded the demon to leave its host, it eventually left. But My goodness, that sounds absolutely horrifying. Number 4. The circus. In this story, this man's father told his son about the day he met the devil. It took place in Juarez, Mexico in the year 1942 when his father was 20 years old. The circus had arrived in town and the man's father and his younger brother went to check it out, and they ran into a short, stubby man wearing a dinner jacket. This stranger introduced himself and said he auditioned for a job at the circus, but the owner turned him down because his act was so frightening that the owner accused him of being the devil. They asked if they could see the trick, and he said yes, but they would have to come to the trailer where he lives. They went to the stranger's place, and he put on a cape and a white glove on his right hand. He started running his left hand over, under, and around his gloved right hand, all while closing and opening his right hand and wiggling his fingers. The stranger then started chanting some strange words in another language. Then he grabbed the tip of the white glove and removed his glove. His hand was gone. It was all bones from his skeleton. The brothers ran out scared, and the stranger stood at the top of the steps, just smiling. Then on the ground was a wooden plank with long nails pointing up. The stranger jumped off the steps and landed right on those nails. They went right through his shoes and blood started to flow. The man's father stood there transfixed as the stranger started to laugh again while pointing at the man's father with his bony finger. They ran away again, and the man's father knew that it was the devil, and they were grateful to be able to escape. Number 3. Alex Bedsoe. Alex Bedsoe saw the devil in 1973 when they were 10 years old. Apparently, the devil was arrested and in a jail cell, so Alex went with a man named Tater to see it. Tater had a beat up truck, and he had claimed to have shaken the devil's hand. When Andy got there, he saw the cell windows and only one cell had its lights on. He said, "I could only see the plaster ceiling, then a shadow moved across it. The shadow stopped, it was in the shape of a human head, except 2 small horns rose from it. Then suddenly the head was standing at the window, looking out into the night, looking, I was certain, right at me. I could only see it from the nose up, and because the light was behind it, I could make out no facial details. But the horn seemed to be jet black, and the hairless head was in fact a deep, dark red." The next day, people in the trailer park talked about nothing else. The county sheriff came to get him about 1 in the morning, but there wasn't nobody in the cell. Everybody figured it was some kind of joke played by the pastor. I never asked about that night, and as I grew older, I accepted that the suggestion hovering in the hot summer air had worked on my child's brain and conjured what I thought I'd seen. Except for one thing. About a week afterwards, Hader started driving around in a new truck. I mean brand new, a 1975 Chevy Blazer with 4-wheel drive and a camper shell. Lots of people asked where he'd gotten the money for it, since otherwise his lifestyle didn't change. For me, the source of the new truck was plain as day, and the proof, it was painted red. Devil red. Number 2. Jennifer Perez. This is the testimony of a 15-year-old girl who was brought up in a Christian home. She strayed from that path, got into drugs, died, and was sent to hell. Fortunately, she was given a second chance, but this is her story. She was in the hospital and her spirit woke up, but her body didn't. As a spirit, 2 men dressed in red approached her and told her to come with them. She then went to heaven and saw the Lord and 2 angels, Gabriel and Michael. She and Gabriel went through a black door and it was dark and they were falling. The farther they fell, the hotter it was, and it smelled like sulfur. She was in hell, and she was seeing people being tortured by various demons. The cries and torture scared her. She then saw a massive red creature in the middle of it all that was just watching everything. She assumed that was the devil and it terrified her. She then ascended back to heaven and was asked for a second chance. She then woke up in the hospital, alive, and devoted her life to God. And coming in at number 1 is Sister Josefa Mendez. This young Spanish sister, who had a short religious life of great suffering, experienced revelations throughout much of her life. More than once, she was taken to hell to witness and feel the suffering firsthand. Sister Josefa was reluctant to write on the subject of hell, and did so only to conform to her Lord's wishes. She wrote about her experiences in her journal. Sister Josefa described it as the greatest torment of hell, namely was the soul's inability to love. She wrote, "One of these damned souls cried out, 'This is my torture, that I want to love and cannot. There's nothing left in me but hatred and despair. If one of us could so much as make a single act of love, but we cannot, we live on hatred.'" As mentioned, she went to hell multiple times, but one time she saw the devil. devil. She wrote, souls were crying out and the devil answered. Insinuate yourselves by inducing carelessness in them, but keep in the background so that you are not found out. Tempt these others with ambition, to self-interest, to acquiring wealth without working, whether it be lawful or not. That entry was from February 3rd, 1923. She visited hell many times after that, but didn't report on seeing the devil again.